Mr. President, Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very grateful to you, Mr. President, and to demosEUROPA for this invitation, and to you personally for your kind introductory remarks. I welcome very much this opportunity to speak under the aegis of demosEUROPA today. I know the value of this think tank, its ability to interconnect in the world of think tanks, its role in shaping policy views. So I'm really delighted to be here today in the context of my consultations with the Polish authorities in view of the work I'm doing at the request of President Barroso on how to relaunch the single market. The single market, as you said, Mr. President, is one of the pillars of European integration. After all, only a few years ago, we were calling ourselves, and we were called by others the common market. The single market is certainly one of the key achievements, but has come under attack. And you mentioned the crisis, which of course exposed some nationalistic tendencies, or at least of economic nationalism. But my view and the starting point of my analysis is that well before the crisis, for a number of years, we had seen in Europe clear symptoms of integration fatigue. Wim Kok, the author of the Kok Report of 2005 on the Lisbon strategy, had in his report also a section on the single market, although it was not the main focus of the report. Let me read a sentence, I quote. This is January 2005. The internal market program is felt to be yesterday's business and does not receive the priority it should. This is a fatal policy error. End of quote. Since then, 5 years ago, in spite of the determined actions by the European Commission, especially as regards enforcement of the rules, the single market has been meeting increasing reluctance. And let me stress this, even before the crisis. Just think of 3 events before the crisis. The legislative proposal on the Takeover Directive to create a single market for corporate control in Europe, how much resistance it met and how relatively poor the final legislative result was. The Services Directive, which aimed at creating a single market for services which account for some 60 to 70% of Europe's GDP. We cannot speak of a failure. There is a Services Directive, but certainly relative to the initial bold intentions of the Commission, it is a somewhat toned down directive, and now we are in the stage of implementing it. And think of the third factor, which is not a legislative one, third event, the French referendum of 2005. That was a referendum on whether or not to ratify the Rome II Treaty of October 2003, the Constitutional Treaty. But if we go back and think of what were the topics on which the debates centered in France, we can say that it was an ex post referendum on the Rome I Treaty of 1957. And many of the arguments used by the opponents of the yes, that is, by the supporters of the no, centered around concerns about free movement of labor, free movement in general. I don't need to remind you of the prominence that the figure of the Polish plumber had achieved in the context of that referendum debate. So, and of course with the crisis we had temptations of economic nationalism, sometimes more than temptations, good enough that the Commission stood firm, and in the end even the Member States showed a shared sense of responsibility, not always translating into concrete actions of protectionism. Their verbal pronouncements like that an automobile company coming from one Member State of the EU better use resources put at its disposal by that state in order to face a difficult situation in that Member State rather than in others. And even following the crisis, I'm afraid, the drive towards the single market, if we leave things go inertially, will not be strong. Why? Because the single market is called a market. The whole exercise is to make it single, but it should be a market to begin with. And this crisis has been seen by many as a crisis of the market economy. This is less perceived in countries like Poland, which have been happy to embrace the market economy more recently than other countries in Europe. But there are countries in Europe which were at the forefront of the creation of the early decades of European integration, which have become more critical about the market economy, that they think to be connotated by Anglo-Saxon colors, and the Anglo-Saxon manifestations of the market economy, be it in the US or the UK or Ireland, have not come out fortified by the crisis. Hence, whereas for 10 or 20 years it was relatively easy, not completely easy, but relatively easy to promote the deepening of the single market in Europe, because it was single and because it was a market, and market was going with the wind. Now with the crisis, for a number of years to come, I think the burden of the proof will be on those who want more market and more of a single market, not the other way around.